What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are. We're in the middle of April. It's hard to believe that. I mean, we say that every episode. It seems that, oh my God, it's already February. Oh my God, it's already March. And oh my God, it's already mid-April. So we're almost into May. And then June comes and then the rest of the year, but we're not here to talk about calendars and weathers and whatnot. Here we're talking about football. We'll see what's been going on in Paraguay over the last week. Certainly things that are going on in the league. Obviously, what's been going on with the U17 team also playing in Ecuador to have their chance of qualifying for the U17 World Cup. Women's game has also been kind of ramped up in that, and also Libertadores Sudamericana happening this week coming up. Certainly big games for all the Paraguayan teams participating in, and we'll definitely dissect what they will do. So let's go into someone that's been kind of covering what's been going on in the women's game. Go to Fede as well, because we had some really interesting games, and you would think that after not making the World Cup, the interest would kind of lay a bit low, but that doesn't mean that they're still not being competitive. They're still playing games, and it's, I guess, try to think now for 2027. It's 4 years away, but that's kind of the stepping stone and the first steps for women's football in Paraguay.
Yeah, totally, Roberto. Hi to you, hi to Ralph, hi to everybody that's always following us on Guarani Vision. Yeah, like always, much to talk about, games to review, games coming up next week, big games in Libertadores and Sudamericana, like you were mentioning, Roberto. But as for this past week, I was also following our women's national team as we began to leave behind that huge opportunity we had, right, that we missed also to qualify to this World Cup that's coming up, the Women's World Cup this year that will be played in New Zealand. We got to think beyond that. We got to think on this new journey that just started. Paraguay started a new process, we could even say, but with the same coach, right? Marcelo Friqueiro is going to keep on coaching the girls here in Paraguay, the Brazilian coach. He's been able to maintain his job, and he called up local players in this opportunity to play two friendlies against Ecuador. Players are playing in the Apertura here in Paraguay. We were able to beat Ecuador in both friendlies with very good results from them. In the first friendly, Maria Segovia scored a tremendous free kick from very far away. The player from Cerro Porteño. We won just 1-0. Ecuador played a lot better than us that game, but we were able to manage to get the result. And in the second friendly, it was all tied up after Karina Castellano, the top scorer from Olympia, scored very early in the game. And then we needed Rosa Aquino, a very experienced player from Guarani, to show up in the second half and ended scoring the winning goal. It was a 2-1. A good result from the girls, especially the opportunity to see new players. We had a whole bunch of players that played for the first time with the national jersey. The European players got some sort of rest, we could say, and it was time for the local players to show up, and it was good. It was a good game from our girls. The local players showing that they can really play against European caliber kind of players, because that's what Ecuador brought with their squad. They had several players that play in Europe, and we did not have that by our side, but we still managed to get the result, to gain some experience, and especially for our coach to see what kind of players he has right now coming about, right? We saw for the first time one of the players that really stood out to me was center back Camila Barbosa. This is a totally new player. She's just starting to show up in Olympia. She's a center back, really tall player. I was told that she only spoke Portuguese back at home where she was playing, and she's been learning Spanish here playing for Olympia. Those weird kind of stories that you have of those players that play in the countryside and really need somebody to sponsor them and bring them here to the capital, to Asuncion. She's playing in a big team like Olympia, the last champion, and she got her opportunity with the Albirroja. That's not the only story. There's a couple more there in this national team, this women's national team that really started out really good this year, winning 2 games against Ecuador. We'll see what the future brings, but at least we saw new players that I think we're going to see in the next calls up also. And as for the local league, we have very good games coming up. Also on the women's game, still talking about that, obviously, because week 6 is coming up. And I was looking that we got Guarani that's leading right now, playing against Olimpia this weekend, and Libertad Limpeño also playing against Cerro Porteño. These games could decide it. The women's league is much shorter than the men's league. It's only 12 games. They only play once against each other, and then we will have the first champion of the Apertura. So this week 6 looks like it could decide. All will be obviously keeping our attention on these games and probably talking about that on the next episode. We got to talk about the men's game, Roberto. We got to talk about everything that happened this week because we had midweek games and we're halfway there. We're past halfway there, even also because week 12 was on their way this week, and Libertad is just unbeatable. Guarani could not stop them. They couldn't get a win at home. I think that was the big win. That was the game that everybody was waiting for, and it ended up being tied 0-0. Definitely not what I was waiting for, Robert.
No, it definitely wasn't one for the spectacular type of games. No, it definitely wasn't up there. Let's go to Ralph on this one because certainly one thing that we do want to focus on is obviously what's been going on in Ecuador with the U17, the South American U17 Championship, the Sudamericano, happening currently in Ecuador. Paraguay are currently playing in the final stage, the hexagonal, to qualify for the U17 World Cup, where they would have to finish in one of the 4 spots. They'll be taking on teams such as Ecuador, Argentina, Brazil, and Venezuela. They lost to Ecuador in the first game in Quito after taking the lead yet again. It's becoming a consistent problem for Paraguay on all levels, not being able to close games. At the time of recording, they take on Brazil tonight. But there is still that hope that Paraguay could indeed qualify, at least for some tournament at some level in any gender, really. Let's hope that the U17 can do that over there in Ecuador.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, guys. Yeah, I mean, Fede was talking about the disappointment of not reaching the Women's World Cup. We had the disappointment of not reaching the under-20s Men's World Cup. And now the under-17s are in action in Ecuador, and it's looking very tricky after losing that first game. I mean, once again, we're seeing some good individual performances at times. So Rodrigo Villalba, the captain, he's from Libertad. He's joint top scorer at the moment in the tournament, and he got the first goal there, and playing really well, coming in off the left and making his presence felt in the box and doing well. And then you have Cesar Minio on the right, the Guarani player. He's also been very good in the patches that he plays. He hasn't started every single game. He's only 16. He's been playing well. You have Jorge Mora, who came on as a substitute in that game and definitely adds a lot of technical quality. He's from Sol de America. So you have some of these individual stars, but as a team, the Paraguay under-17s are suffering really the same problem as the under-20s, which they can start games well, but they don't have either the physicality or the game management to be able to see out matches. And of course, this is very interesting that the coach is the same person. It's Aldo Bobadilla. He was the coach of the under-20s. He's also now coach of the under-17s. And we're seeing he hasn't been able to fix some of the problems from the under-20s. There's an added difficulty as well, of course, that they played the first round in Guayaquil, which is at sea level, and it's very hot, humid. It's similar to Paraguay, really. Now they're in Quito at altitude, so it gets even harder for them to play. Maybe the good thing is that Brazil typically don't do very well at altitude as well, but this Brazil under-17s is looking very strong, and I think it's going to be a difficult match. If they lose that, then with Argentina and Venezuela to come, it's starting to look really difficult, I think, for them to qualify for the World Cup. But we keep hope. We keep hope on the show, see what they can do. But I think that giving away the result the way they did against Ecuador was just really disappointing. And like I said, it's this pattern we've been seeing at the moment with the youth teams in Paraguay that are coached by the same coach.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, and certainly something that we've kind of spoken about at times here on this show, multiple times I would say on this show. So we're not going to go into that as of yet. We'll see what happens and give them the chance to see if they can indeed qualify. Yeah, keep it low. Maybe they surprise us and do indeed qualify for the U17 World Cup, which would be a positive step, I guess, for Paraguayan football as a whole after consistent failures of not qualifying for other tournaments. So we'll decide. We will talk about that when we need to. But let's go into what we saw in the local league, because obviously over the last few days we're seeing a league that you would think that now it's starting to open up a bit more. We saw some matches on the weekend and also midweek. Certainly the games that had to be spoken about midweek were the games between Luqueño and Olimpia. Luqueño getting a great win against Olimpia, an Olimpia side that kind of has fallen off a bit now in this league campaign. 1-0 loss to them. We saw Cerro Porteño, despite losing that game against Libertad back a few days ago, they still have been able to win. They defeated Almeliano, they defeated Tacuaru barely, all by 1 goal. But the one game that I think was a big disappointment was first against second Libertad and Guarani, a 0-0 draw. I mean, I'll go to Fede on this one, because I think the one thing that we do want to talk about is, everyone talks about the big four with Libertad, Guarani, Cerro, and Olimpia. Even Trinidense has been given a mention, and they won as well. So they're still having good results. Really, we need to talk about the two teams that did get promoted, having great starts. And, Ralph, you can go on this one. You were a native Luqueño for many years, so you have the intelligence and the knowledge of how that club works out. But to see Trinidense and Luqueño, and again, going to Fed on this one, I think it's a demonstration of how some of the promoted sides, and we've seen this now in a constant over the last few years, how consistently teams who do get promoted do punch above their weight and try to rise above teams that have been in the league for many years or have also been fighting relegation but always survive. Here you have two promoted sides that are having a good start to their Apertura season, so it's good to see, and it's hopeful for them to see if they can indeed qualify for some sort of some sort of South American competition come the end of the year.
Exactly, Roberto. They can actually aim for that right now. Trinidense, Sportivo Luqueño, they're pretty far away from General Caballero, Tacuarí, which are the teams that are looking at relegation as of right now. Yeah, the year has just started out, but this is a table, especially that teams that just got to first division, this is the table they look at, right? This is they're not thinking much about being champions, even though that was the speech in the locker room at preseason in Sportivo Luqueño, especially because that it's a big team. They have a lot of people behind it, and they always have to aim high. But right now, it's good for Luqueño to be stable. It's good for Sportivo Trinidense that they had that great start at the season. Yeah, they lost a couple of games, but they look like themselves again. These last couple of games, they've been able to win again. So they're not really worried right now. They're really enjoying their ride in first division. And I think that's just great for them, for their coach, especially for their coaches to be able to keep on working, because, for teams like this, where every point pretty much counts, they really have to win a couple of games now and then. They can't go 2-3 games without winning, because the coach is going to get fired. That's just the way it works here in Paraguay. And Florentin has been able to maintain his job in Sportivo Luqueño. I think we talked about Marcelo Perez a couple of shows ago, one of the top scorers, one of the big strikers, the best strikers that are coming about in this league lately. He's one of the stars that's having a breakthrough year, really. And in Trinidense, you see a whole bunch of players with much experience, and these are two teams that have really made it hard for the big teams. I mean, we can remember that Trinidense Libertad match. That was probably one of the hardest games for Libertad in this first half of the tournament. Trinidense was winning that game, and Libertad had to turn around being the away team, and Luqueño just beat Olimpia, and Olimpia is looking really bad right now, Roberto. I don't know what Olimpia fans are thinking, but they brought in a coach that just doesn't know what's going on, is not picking the right players. We're not seeing his touch on the team yet, and Luqueño didn't do much in the game, but they did enough to beat Olimpia, a big team here in Paraguay, and it's always a special rivalry, right, Ralph? I mean, for Luqueño fans to beat Olimpia, it was a special one. That I think that really made them feel like they're back in first division, right? I mean, beating a big team like this and stomping on the last champion, a team that does not look that way really this year.
Yeah. I mean, it was a real shame just to start that they couldn't play at the home stadium, because Luqueño with those passionate fans, and there's always, or there's traditionally issues, and so the game was played in the national team stadium, so it didn't maybe have quite the same feel. I've been to lots of Luqueño Olimpia games in the Feliciano Cáceres, and that's always a big match. Lots of fans from both sides, because Olimpia is a huge club. They have fans across the country, including Luque, of course. So within Luque, you have Olimpia fans, you have Cerro fans, but then you have the Luqueños, you know, the loyal ones to their city, and so it's always a really passionate game, and very often quite hard fought. You don't usually see like a kind of big thrashing, even though Olimpia are often doing much better than Luqueño. In this case, I mean, I think what Luqueño have done and what Trinidense have done as well, both teams, is I was just looking at their defensive records. They actually have the third and fourth best defenses in the league. So Trinidense have only conceded 12. Luqueño have only conceded 13. So you only have Libertad and Guarani who have actually done better. Cerro and Olimpia have both conceded more goals. And so that's been really important. In Luqueño's case, Florentine's done really well, I think, getting some very experienced players. I mean, first he brought in a goalkeeper, Falcon, the Uruguayan, which I think they needed, because last year it was still Tobias Vargas, who's been like a guy. There's been a Luqueño for years and years, but in Primera has never really been that good quality. So they got the goalkeeper, but then he got Aguilar back, Pablo Aguilar, to play in central defense, very experienced. He's got Rodrigo Rojas and Jorge Mendoza in the middle, two very experienced players that have won championships. Rojas, of course, was key when Olimpia were doing really well a few years back. So he's managed to, I think, get some of that experience and stability, and then around it has got these young, exciting players like we talked about. Perez Charpentier is still very young. The other kid, Sebastian Ruiz Diaz, or
Diego Fernandez.
Yeah, Fernandez, that's the guy, Diego Fernandez. Yeah, so they have all these kind of kids playing exciting football at the top, and then at the back they've got the stability. So that's helping them. That's helping them very well. And it was that clean sheet against Olimpia. I'm just trying to think. I think recently they've conceded in the games to Emiliano, which they drew, and the crazy game against Cerro, which ended 3-3. Other than that, the 5 games around that, they've kept clean sheets, and so that's been so important, and that's what Florentine's doing really well. And for Olimpia, I mean, I agree with Fede. I don't think Diego Aguirre is winning any fans at the moment, but I do think he's been really unlucky with injuries. I mean, this Olimpia team is like everybody's getting injured, and now I think Paiva's the latest that's injured. So you had Delis Gonzalez is out for this season. You have Montenegro started getting injured. Now you have Paiva is injured. Alan Wilk has been getting some minutes now, the under 20 striker, and it's because there's just really nobody else left to play up front, and that was their problem, right? They did have a lot of possession against Luqueño, but they couldn't find a goal.
Yeah, no, obviously it's been nice to see kind of this, you know, evolution, at least this kind of upward trajectory from these two sides, and from Luqueño as well, getting that win. I just wanted to really go into what we're seeing. I mean, with this draw with Libertad and Guarani, I mean, yes, we're halfway. It's 6 points. I mean, you know, there's still big games between these two sides. And I know we kind of, at least Fede says that he's kind of really given the title to Libertad in this case. And, you know, we're still, like you said, a little less than halfway from the end of the season. I just want to go to Fede quickly. Is there any way where you can change your mind if these draws, or at least, like, let's say Libertad do indeed drop some points, and they're just looking at some of their schedule, you know, they have Resistencia, they're going to play Luqueño next as well, and then they take on Nacional. So, you know, certainly games that are indeed beatable, but let's just say that they do drop more points like they did against Guarani. Are you going to change your mind this time, or are you still going to be like, no, I'm still convinced that they could win the league?
I don't see this team going into a losing streak, and I don't see any of these teams that are following Libertad right now getting on a winning streak. I don't see it happening, Roberto. I don't see Guarani having enough. I mean, they pretty much melted down against Libertad, especially with the injuries. I mean, the team just fell apart in that first half physically. I mean, they can't play every 3 days. That was the big problem for them. I mean, they had a big match on the weekend. They had Libertadores last week, and they just couldn't keep the rhythm. They don't have enough squad right now, and Libertad does. Libertad puts on the bench Oscar Tacuara Cardoso, who has scored how many goals in these last 2 games? I was reading, I think a tweet the other day that he scored more goals than Haaland in these last 2 games. It's incredible what Oscar Cardoso has done with Libertad in the last 2 games, and he's been sitting down. I mean, Garnero can do that. I mean, he can sit down Oscar Cardoso, and he can put in there Roque Santa Cruz to try to have him come back. I mean, he has all his strikers right now going high. He has Oscar Cardoso scoring. He has Alfio Oviedo when he comes in. He's making a difference. And you have Roque Santa Cruz there fighting for that spot also in center forward. And you have a whole bunch of young players that are coming, that are also knocking on the door on different spots in defense, in midfield, Enzo Gonzalez in offense also. I mean, Libertad just feels like it has it all, Roberto. And just like they did last year in the Apertura, they're just cruising by. And I don't see an opponent for them. I don't see a team that's up there in the standards in the way that they're playing. I mean, this team has just evolved into a really good team. And when they feel good with the ball, it's really hard to stop them. I don't know how Guarani was able to stop them from scoring, because that's what Libertad was doing lately. They were really good in front of the goal, but Libertad, at least Guarani was able to put in young players for those injured ones, and at least they got the experience out of it. They got something out of this game against Libertad because they really needed to win, but they just didn't have enough of it. I think this was Guarani's last chance, and I think, to be honest, Guarani and Cerro Porteño have been the only ones that have been kind of close to Libertad's level. But in these games against the team that looks like the champions, they just haven't been able to outshine them. They've been just short to beat Libertad, and that's the big difference, I believe, in the table right now. That game against Cerro Porteño and this game against Guarani. Libertad faced 2 times already Guarani, and they beat him once, and now they drew against them. So Libertad is making the difference also against their opponents.
Ralph, I guess I'll say the same thing to you. Is it a little too late for all the other teams trying to catch up to Libertad?
Yeah, I think it's a similar point to Fede. You look at the strength and depth that Libertad have, and then you look at Guarani, who are now starting to go through this injury crisis. You had Nestor Camacho come off after 19 minutes. You already have Barceló is injured, so suddenly there's a lot of burden on Federico Santander, who's not really going to be able to play 2 competitions. He's only 31, I think, or 32, but he doesn't have that physical kind of ability to play regularly. So there's going to be a question about where the goals can come from. Who else was missing yesterday? Like Walter Clar was missing all of a sudden. He was named in the squad, and then he couldn't play. Gil Romero was also, he looked like he was coming off injured as well. So they're really struggling, and Libertad don't have that problem. Cerro is interesting in the sense that, okay, Cerro actually players are starting to come back. I'm sure we'll talk about them a bit more, but now Lucena is actually coming back. They seem to have a good way of being able to manage Aquino and Pachi, so they are fresh for games. But where are they going to make up the 6 points? I mean, could Cerro be Libertad in La Hoya? Yes, they could, but then they'd still be 3 points behind, and that would assume they keep winning all their games, which we are seeing really from Facundo Saba, that the league is not his priority. It's the Copa Libertadores, and so they're not playing full strength teams like we talked last night. It wasn't their very best team, I don't think. So I don't know. I just can't see where would you pick up the points, and where's Libertad going to drop those points? You never know, right? It's a crazy season, but I think just looking at it, Libertad seem much stronger than the rest.
Yeah, I think it's kind of become the regular ideal situation that Libertad wants to be in, is that they take such a big lead and maybe they kind of drop off a bit, but it's just becomes a bit too late because they've already separated themselves too far apart from the rest. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but we'll see what's been going on with the teams participating in the Libertadores and the Sudamericana. We already mentioned 5 of them already participating in them, 5 of them already kick-starting their competition already in the last episode. So we'll talk about the games that are coming up real quick. The first one is talking about Cerro Porteño. They're off to the Morumbi, to Sao Paulo to take on Palmeiras, a Palmeiras side that just won the Paulistão, a team that is definitely one of the strongest, if not the strongest in Brazil, alongside Flamengo. So this is a really interesting one, I would say, for Cerro. If they can snatch any sort of result over there in Brazil, that would help them boost their chances of getting out of the group. Looking at the other teams real quickly, right now we'll be hosting Alianza Lima, and Alianza Lima side that was actually fortunate enough to get a draw against Atlético Paranaense over there in Lima. But Libertad have, a really strong record at home. Alianza Lima are not exactly a team that is very much successful away. So that's one to look out for. And then finally, Olimpia will be taking on a Patronato side that definitely need to get their first points. Both sides really looking for their first win in this one. So I want to go to Ralph really first. I mean, 3 different situations for 3 different teams. I would say that for Cerro's case, they're the one that are maybe less expected to get something from there just because of how hard it is to get any sort of result in Brazil. But at least with how Facundo Saf has really changed his side, it's given them some sort of, I would say, belief really that they can do something and play out a game that could be fortunate enough for them to get some sort of result. And as for Olimpia and Libertad, they know that they need to get the results from home because those are the games that you need to win in order to qualify, and getting the result at home allow you to boost your chances of getting out of the group.
Yeah, it's a contrasting week for the Paraguayan teams because the Cerro, maybe its hope is what they have is the only thing, because I mean, remember the last time they went there, they got beaten 5-0. And this is a Palmeiras team that is incredibly strong. Like you just said, just won the Paulistão, which also I think is they've been playing state competition, so they haven't been as intense. So they're coming into this maybe more, I suppose, rested than Cerro are. What we're seeing with what we have to think is this Cerro Porteño team stronger than the one that Chiquiase took back in whenever it was, like July or August, the one that lost 5-0? I don't know. I mean, they don't have Alexis Duarte. They have Morales back, which is a good thing. They have Churin back, which is probably actually a good thing. But then I don't know if, well, Lucena should be fit there, or he might be fit for the game. I think Patino is not going to make the game. So it could be tough, I think, for them. Wilder Vieira, we're not sure. He suffered a very nasty injury we found out about. But he might be back, he might not. But I don't know if the team is going to be able to be strong enough to stop this Palmeiras machine. I mean, anything they pick up, of course, if they pick up a point, is a huge bonus, because when they target getting out of the group, you almost write off the 2 games against Palmeiras, and it's just make sure we win the other games. Another point for Cerro as well, they've been to Sao Paulo 12 times. They've only won twice, and that was one at Allianz Arena and one at the Palestra Italia, the old Palmeiras Stadium. The fact that this is moved to the Morumbi is actually bad news for them. They've been to the Morumbi twice. They've lost both times and never scored. So if anyone believes in superstition and that kind of thing, the fact that the game has been moved is actually bad news for them. You would think maybe it's better that the Palmeiras aren't in the home stadium, but there you go. And then just quickly on, Olimpia and Libertad, it's totally different situation. They need to win these games. I think Libertad can win this game, and quite easily. Alianza Lima suffer a lot in Copa Libertadores. I think they have one of the worst runs historically in terms of not winning games. And we just talked about how strong Libertad are. They have their weekend game as well, is at home. So, and they're staying at home. They don't have to travel. I mean, we just also talked about how they can rotate players. So you really think, like, if you have like Tito Villalba and Lorenzo Melgarejo like running at that Alianza Lima team, it should be a home win for them. And then for Olimpia, who are in a really difficult situation, like we're saying with the injuries, but remember they're playing Patronato. Patronato are not in the top division, right? They're playing a team that's kind of only just qualified through through these strange systems that we have in South America, that this can happen. And so really Olimpia have got to have the quality, even without strongest team. And this is where Diego Aguirre has to show some of his kind of experience, right? The thing is, he's here for these big games, and that's what they brought him in for. So I think what we'll see is 2 home wins, but well, 3 home wins we're probably going to see, because Palmeiras will grab the win as well. I don't know what Fede thinks.
Does he have any hope? Does he have any hope that it's not
yeah.
going to be that it will be 2 home wins instead of 3 home wins?
Well, I don't know how Olympus is just gonna do it, right? I mean, with all those injured players and offense, I don't know how Diego Aguirre is really gonna manage to put a team together. We don't know what to expect from this team in defense and in offense. They've been having so many problems. They pretty much concede a goal in every match. So they really need to start fixing, even try to get back their starting goalkeeper. I mean, they have so many injured players right now. Even Olveda has been out these last couple of games. A big opportunity for the sub, the Paraguayan, Espinola that got here at the beginning of the year. He's having his first games, but he's just not showing up to make that difference that Olympia had with Olveda. They were very strong back there, at least with him. Never in defense, because they're never stable with the same 4 players playing back there. And Bruera also being out, the center forward that was brought at the beginning of the year to be the top scorer for this team. He hasn't been able to be stable and play game by game. So I don't know how Olympia is going to do it. And if Olympia loses against Patronato, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen with their coach, with their situation, to be honest with you guys, because Diego Aguirre has just not hit a key so far. I mean, he just hasn't been able to manage this team and hasn't been able to put the right strategy down, and just doesn't have enough players right now, just like I was saying, to even put a starting strong team, even against Patronato, which is probably the weakest team in this group. They're obviously, I believe, out of the 3 Paraguayan teams that are going to play next week, I think they are the ones that really have the pressure to win here in Defensores del Chaco. Hopefully they manage to do that. If not, the Libertadores run is going to look really hard for them. As for Libertad, I'm expecting for this team to get 3 goals, maybe even against the Peruvian team. I think this is the game where Libertad needs to make the difference and really show in this group that what they did in Brazil was part of their plan, and that is to take on this Libertadores very seriously and to be a very strong team and a respected team in this group. So if they win their second game out of 2, Libertad is going to be comfortable up there, and they're going to feel really good about themselves, just like they do in the local league. I think they're taking that level to the Libertadores. They showed it against the Brazilian side on their first game. And as for Cerro Porteño, this is their big challenge, Roberto. I mean, this is the moment that I've been waiting for. I want to see them go against Palmeiras. This team was the one that made them just look ugly last year. I mean, if there's a game for Cerro fans that they remember last year, it wasn't the Super Clásicos against Olimpia. It wasn't the games against Libertad that decided the local titles. I think it was that Palmeiras game that made the difference. I mean, that's where you saw where the Brazilian teams are and where Cerro Porteño was last year. I mean, there was a huge difference between one team and the other. I'm hoping, just like Ralph was saying, Cerro is much better right now with Pachi at his probably best level since I've ever seen him with this jersey. Claudio Aquino are also playing. They're playing together. I'm loving what I'm seeing when both of them are on the pitch. I'm waiting for Robert Morales to start scoring, but you got Churin scoring. Yeah, my doubts are obviously the defense right now, because you have Robert Pires da Mota coming in with Brock, with the Brazilian, playing alongside with him, because Juan Patini has been totally out these last couple of games. He's the leader back there in that defense. But, Robert Pires da Mota, he's been getting game time. He's been playing these last couple of games. I think he's ready also for this challenge. And he's a center back right now. He's not playing much in midfield, even though the spot has also opened up. He's been playing, at least for Saba, he's more a substitute for that defense. And there's a whole bunch of young players also that are starting to get their minutes, not much in Libertadores, but we're seeing them in the local league. I'm hoping that some of them also start to make their way to the starting team. But Cerro is going to have to pretty much play a perfect game. Even though as of right now, I'm not seeing the best from the Brazilian teams yet. I mean, we look at the results from the first week, and there were actually a bunch of surprises, right? With the Brazilian teams playing, especially away. having problems with getting their first win. So maybe the Brazilian teams right now, they're thinking more about their local league. They're not on their top game as of yet. We sometimes say this in Libertadores. They get ready for the second half of the year, not much for the group stage. So maybe this is the moment for Cerro Porteño, and I'm liking their chances. I'm liking what I'm seeing from Facundo Saba, his way of managing the team, the players that are showing up. Even Rafael Carrascal scored the other day in this last match against Ameliano. So he's getting the players on top shape, Roberto. They're playing much better. Even the subs that are coming into this team are making a difference. So I'm liking Cerro Porteño. Maybe a draw, maybe even a win, a big surprise next week on the Libertadores. I'm sticking with Ralph. 2 out of 3 Paraguayan wins next week.
I mean, if they were able to get a win over there in Brazil, I mean, that would absolutely, make so many fans so happy and so excited about this side because, it's only a few sides are able to do it. It's not impossible, nothing is impossible in the sport as we've always talked about, but it would definitely be a remarkable achievement for them to achieve such a result over there. So we'll definitely have to wait and see. And of course, they improved their record in Brazil, which is not exactly the best one. Let's switch into the Sudamericana real quick before we close out. Obviously, two Paraguayan sides are playing, one at home, one away. Guarani, having to bounce back after that loss to Huracan, will be taking on the Nubio side at the Manuel Ferreira, and Tacuaru, traveling all the way to Estudiantes to take on Estudiantes de La Plata. So, Fede, I want to go to you on this one. I think these two games, I feel a bit less optimistic just because of how they've been performing and even in the league as well. I mean, you think that maybe Guarani could indeed bounce back after losing to Huracan over there in Buenos Aires, but from the Nubia side that beat MLF, one of the teams that are favored to get out of the group, at least from the predictions. This is a tough ask. And even a bigger task for Tacuaru to get anything over there in La Plata.
I don't think anybody here in Paraguay is waiting much from Tacuarí, to be honest. I mean, they're not looking good in the local league. They don't really have a starting team as of right now. So besides maybe having a 1 or 2 players stand out on the game, you're not waiting for a big match from the team itself as of right now because they're not looking good as a whole, Tacuarí. So yeah, they got to get themselves together and maybe later on think about the Sudamericana. I don't think they're going to get a win in this next week either. So Guarani, with all these injuries that happened, especially on this last game against Libertad, it's time for the young players, Rob. I mean, this is something that we've actually talked about lately in Guarani. I mean, ever since, what was it, 2 years ago or last year, I think it was, that they played that under 20 Libertadores where they did really well. Much of those players, like Matias Segovia, that was the last one that was sold from Guarani to the Brazilian football. I mean, there's a whole bunch of players that are waiting for the opportunity. And Rodrigo Lopez came at the beginning of the year. He brought in a whole bunch of experienced players, but as of right now, he doesn't have them for the Sudamericana. So it's their time as of right now. It's time for those young players to come in this team and make a difference, see if they can win a spot over and see if they can win a huge match in Sudamericana and get points back, because this team lost really ugly to Huracan and they need to show something in Sudamericana. If not, they're going to be out of this run in this group.
Yeah, it's right. I was just having a quick look at some of the players, those young players, right, from Guarani that played against Libertad, because you had Cantero, the left back, who did well in the under 20s, and Thiago Servin came on as a sub because of the injuries. And I think Servin had a little clash there with Tacuara, with Oscar Cardoso, I remember. So he's only 19, but he's putting himself about with the big legends of Paraguayan football. And now this is another test to do something in continental competition. Yeah, I mean, for Guarani, it was very disappointing, I thought, the Huracan game in the sense of they kind of just let themselves get overrun in a way that we haven't seen so much in the league. So we're talking about the good defenses of Trinidense and Luqueño. Actually, Guarani has managed to, after the first couple of games, they managed to really get a very solid defense. This guy Moya, the Colombian, is doing very well for them. And so it was a surprise to see the way they fell apart. So hopefully at home, they can start to kind of transfer some of that form we've seen in the league, at least defensively, into this game against Danubio. I was looking at their record against, they've only played once against the Uruguayan team in the Sudamericana, which was River Plate. Way back in 2010, they won 2-0, the home game at least, with Jonathan Fabro and Rodrigo Teixeira scoring, two like very Guarani legends from when they won the league back then. So that was cool to see. Let's see who makes their name in this game. I think they should have enough. I do think, I mean, also I think it's maybe an advantage playing a Uruguayan team that of course, Rodrigo Lopez is Uruguayan. He has good knowledge, I'm sure, of the opposition. And then for Tacuary, it really is, it's a very difficult situation they're in. I mean, we've seen they have now a new manager, but it's not really making a change. It's just very difficult for them. They're going to have so much worries now about the relegation, that this is almost become a distraction. It's at least is a distraction that pays good money, but I think these whole trips and having to prepare for these games is really very difficult when they've got such a big fight on in the league, and against a big team like Estudiantes is really going to be very difficult. I mean, they didn't get help with their draw. Last week we were talking about them losing to Red Bull Bragantino, and now they got Estudiantes. Is not easy for them. So I'm more hopeful for Cerro and Palmeiras than I am for Tacuary and Estudiantes, if that gives you any idea of where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, I see this as well, kind of not exactly going well for the Sudamericana sides, and we'll see. Maybe they surprise us. You know how it is sometimes. Like sometimes those weird results you get, I'm like, how is this possible? But we'll definitely wait and see what happens as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.